Hey guys, this is Tyler here. It's September 8th today, and I'm just going to discuss why young men are leaving US and Canada and going to Eastern European countries like Estonia, Russia, Ukraine right now, rather than staying in the US. This is a really interesting topic, and we're seeing a lot of both MGTOW guys that are doing this and non-MGTOW guys, both categories. I myself chose to leave the US in 2018. It was like in the late summer, early autumn time. I was getting very irritated about my situation. My finances actually up until late September, we'll say, were actually really good at the time. And I was kind of figuring that I would leave the US by spring of the following year. I had two situations that occurred. I had both a really bad investment that went south, and I also got fired from my job, which leading causes of me just within a month deciding to leave the US. I left the end of October in 2018. At that time, it was very dark place for me, and I was very sad and very kind of bewildered, you could say. I actually for about 3 or 4 months from late autumn until early spring, I was having nightmares almost every night. In fact, it was a very bad period, but I chose to leave. And the following year, I had actually thought about coming back to the States. That was about a year ago now, or just over a year ago. I mean, I went back for a few weeks. It was in July in 2019, and I ended up deciding I was going to stay in Eastern Europe because I just felt that it was the right place for me to be at this point. Right now I'm 28 years old, and this actually now for me is getting close to 2 years with a couple trips. I've been out of the US now, and it was actually a really good decision I made. It was those circumstances which caused that to happen. We're also seeing a lot of other men that have done the same or will do the same in the near future, especially with this whole COVID crisis. I think a lot of people are questioning their ability to travel in the future, and especially younger men that are just really irritated living in the US and Canada. These are two countries that young guys are really tired of. It's not just myself, it's millions of others, or hundreds of thousands, we'll say. In my case, it wasn't necessarily, it wasn't what I was going to gain living abroad, living in Estonia and Russia. It was about what I also wouldn't have to deal with living in the US. This is the same thing for many other guys that choose to leave. It's not just what they're getting, it's what they won't have to deal with living in the States or Canada. Many guys actually end up realizing it's quite comfortable, the respective countries that they choose to live. I've of course done other video on negatives of living in Estonia, but there's of course many positive things. But this video is not about myself, it's about other guys that are choosing to leave. There's all sorts of reasons, of course. Often the dating / marriage is highlighted as being one of the major reasons of why guys leave, but I actually don't think this is often the first and big reason. I think the tax system and just economic system is actually the biggest reason why guys leave. And people may say, oh, the tax system is tied to, or the marriage and divorce court system is tied to finances, but in this case we'll refer to them separately. The financial systems have just created such an environment that average guy has a lot of trouble just being able to buy basic house, being able to live a fairly decent standard of living now in the US and Canada. And because of how the banking industry has created such a market that prices have inflated so much for property, whether it's rental or purchasing one, mortgages in bigger cities, that it's became very difficult for a common guy to buy a house or an apartment. Likewise, property taxes and other related expenses, homeowners expenses have greatly increased in the past 10 years in big cities. I know, for example, where my parents live in Chicagoland, their property tax and homeowners insurance in the past 10 years has probably increased it's doubled from just 10 years ago. And keep in mind that what it was 10 years ago was already fairly high. So this just puts in perspective how high we're talking about. Also understand the job market, job environment. It's very uncomfortable for many men nowadays. And what men realized is that, okay, we can just go to places like Eastern Europe, Serbia, Russia, Ukraine, and live in these countries, and we can pay much lower cost of living and still have all the amenities that we would have back at home, and sometimes even more. And so having all of this is a huge factor. Now also the stress levels may also be lower for the common guy, because all the stresses that people have in first world countries or US and Canada, while on all the stress that people have in US and Canada, you won't have in some of these other countries. While there may be stresses of living in that society, it's a different kind of stress. And for many guys that leave, it's actually a stress that's not as hard on them, if that makes sense. When you look at like the retirement systems in America and Canada, we can just see that a lot of these systems are likely to be unsustainable for the next 20 or 30 years, based on the fact that it's millennial and Generation X men that are the first generation that are largely leaving now Western countries. They have noticed, or they realize that most of these like pension retirement systems weren't going to benefit them anyhow, so perhaps leaving may not have made a difference for this promised pension, whether a guy was in a government or a private sector job. So just going ahead and leaving may have been the best choice, because the timing of course is more essential than the all else. You can always find a way to make money to further yourself career-wise in the future, but you cannot take back time, and time is so essential. Going back to the first initial point I brought up is regarding the whole dating and marriage scene, and this also is undoubtedly a big factor why millennial, especially in Generation Z guys, are opting to leave or have left, because they want to have a healthy dating life and possibly get married. Eastern countries in general to this day are still some of the best options for men who leave, for high quality young men who would like to get married in a foreign country. There's some phenomenal options. Serbia, Belarus, Russia, Ukraine, these are 4 countries that I think of. There's other ones, of course. I live in Estonia, and for some men, Estonia is a great option. These men have realized that even though divorce and marriage and all relationship aspects are risky, that the level of risk engaging in these matters in a Western country is much elevated compared to in an Eastern country. Doing this in an Eastern country, they reduce some of these risks, and it's not guaranteed success in the long run, but it's a higher guarantee that a relationship will be successful in one of these countries, especially somewhere like Russia or Belarus or Serbia. These are countries institutionally that promote strong, healthy relationships among families, religion, and a high sense of duty. This is something that's becoming less common in Western countries. When one combines all of these factors, it becomes quite apparent why a guy would want to leave. And also understand that in some countries, there's phenomenal career potential opportunities that a guy may have, a younger guy, and so they may actually be more benefited living in an Eastern country. Example here is that there's guys that make 6 figures, they're teachers teaching Asian students. Some of these guys, due to the fact that they have to work within Eastern time zones, the student of course comes first, it means that they would have very terrible hours if they were living back in a Western country. So it's actually more sensible, my brothers in this category, to live in a Eastern country like Russia that's nearby to China. The time zone is closer and it's more comfortable in this kind of profession. So this would be actually optimization professionally for this people in this category. Of course, there's many other factors here I'll go into in a second video of why men by and large are leaving, but this is an introduction to the issue, and I look forward to everyone's feedback below. Thank you.